All right now, folks. All right now, CJ. How you doing, buddy? Hope you're having a good day. Okay. 3, 2. Little Zeppelin to begin the podcast, huh? How's that? I was laughing a minute ago talking to my friend CJ, who edits this podcast, and I told him a couple of jokes from my elementary school days. So he just left a few minutes ago and kind of just getting my head on right. And then I started laughing a little bit, smiling a little bit. And I remembered my favorite all-time joke from elementary school, which would have been, I guess, whenever I was telling this, maybe 55 years ago, 52 years ago. I don't know. It's a long time ago. You ready? What did Tarzan say when he saw the elephants coming over the hill? He said, "Look, here come the elephants over the hill." Part 2. What did Tarzan say when he saw the elephants coming over the hill wearing sunglasses? The answer? Nothing. He didn't recognize them. Are you a school child? Which brings us to today's which brings us to today's thoughts and today's podcast. The title is The Orphans of Mardin and Rio de Janeiro. A good while back, I was traveling way out in eastern Turkey to a province out there that's just north of the Syrian border, but way out east. So we're getting towards the Syrian border with Iraq. And so it's just north of the border. Mardin is out there, a pretty famous city from olden times. And I went out there with a couple of friends, and we're just kind of hanging out, looking at the area in these ancient places, and wandering around, eating different kinds of food and meeting different kinds of people. A lot of Kurdish people live in that area, of course, in eastern Turkey. Visiting with them and just seeing what's going on. While out there, we heard about a very unique and famous old monastery. So we drove out to the monastery and actually were invited to stay over for a couple of nights. And this monastery was a Orthodox, Christian Orthodox monastery in Turkey. And the orthodoxy of that particular persuasion was the Syrian Orthodox Church. Of course, we related to Russian Orthodox and Greek Orthodox and Eastern Orthodoxy, okay. So, stayed at this old, huge monastery, ancient place. I think it was built on the site of an ancient temple back a couple thousand years ago to one of the nature gods, if I remember correctly. And so at this monastery were these these Syrian Orthodox priests on their robes and hats and all that. Very friendly, long white beards. And I think there was 3 of them there at the time. And they also were open and had a orphanage for young boys, for boys, children, boys. And so I met the boys, met the kids, and they would do school with them, they would do lessons with them, and we'd visit with the priests, and we'd visit with the kids and all of this. And one particular night, I know it was in the summer because it was so very, very warm, so hot during the day. Of course, very warm at night. Well, that first night and the second night, suddenly at bedtime, they said, well, no, we all go up to the roof. So we all went up to the roof, and they had already had wooden cots up there, so the kids, the orphans brought their little blankets and a padding, and they had one for us. So we all were on the roof of this monastery, way out in the middle of nowhere, and looked up at the stars of the sky. It was one of those things that you see in famous pictures in magazines, where it's just like an incredible array of stars and just strewn across the galaxy. And it was just so rich. There was not any light where we were around us for miles and miles and miles and miles and miles and miles. So it was just like, whoa. And you know that feeling, I hope, of just being wowed, just being like overcome. So anyway, suddenly the kids, these orphans, started to sing hymns. And it was just like, oh, and the kids were singing hymns, and we're smiling at each other. I laid back, listening to these hymns, looking at the sky, and was just overwhelmed with the sweetness and a feeling of life, feeling of warmth, a feeling of embracing what the moment was. Feeling these kids, just these orphans, like, hey. Now let's jump. Some years later, and I make a trip with a friend of mine down to Rio de Janeiro, which of course you know is in Brazil, famous for the Carnival and lots of different things that go on in Rio that they have mentioned about. Famous beaches being, Copacabana and Ipanema. The girl from Ipanema. I remember that song. It's a great song. And so went down there to an orphanage for a few weeks to help them out. So we brought a check from a very wealthy donor to buy the orphanage a brand new big van for transportation and to help with repairs. Hang out. It was about an hour, a little bit over an hour away from Rio de Janeiro, where this orphanage was. Maybe an hour and a half, actually. Something like that. So I remember being at the orphanage. We're going to get back to that in a minute. I went over and visited Rio several times. Just wanted to see Sugarloaf Mountain, the Jesus statue, the view from there, the incredible Bay Area, the beach area, just everything you could think of. Wow, everybody wants to go to Rio, a big jet setter place from the 60s, 70s, 80s, somewhere in there, you know. Maybe it still is. Now, I think the Olympics were just there too. Now, while in Rio, running around, I noticed that there was a great contrast between what is the tourist area and the streets of Rio. So among the things that happened while I was walking the streets, and I was very aware, I knew that there was a lot of street children, a lot of orphans that grow up on the street, and street children were there, teenagers, children, you know, and you just had to kind of watch what's going on and nod and smile and not get, you know, let that know what's going on or get by yourself out in the back alley somewhere. But that's true of most every city when you're very unfamiliar. I remember that I did have a situation where I got pickpocketed coming out of a bank, getting on a bus, I was a tandem of two young guys, teenagers, and I learned a big lesson there. So professional how they, the one in front climbing up the stairs to the bus, lost his footing, hit me, the guy behind me. As soon as he The guy came into me, the guy behind him went into my pocket and got my money that I'd come out of the bank with, just change. About $140, about $160. Didn't even know they did it. But I felt that something was off because it was so unnatural what happened, the way that he fell, this kid. That I got on the bus with them, and it was crowded, and they scooted to the front, and they got off at the next stop, and I was sitting there just watching them, and I went, and I put my hand in my pocket, and there was nothing there. And I knew immediately what had happened. I got off the next stop, ran back to this stop, and I still to this day, I know thievery, we've talked about this before, just really bugs me, and it should. It bugs you too, I hope, unless you're a thief. And maybe it bugs you when a thief steals from a thief. I don't know. Is there honor among thieves? So what I'm thinking about is, slow down, John, slow down. What I'm thinking about is the situation where, what would I have done if I'd caught him? Like I'm going to do something? Of course, I didn't even see him in the crowded streets. I'm thinking, what are you doing, John? You're running it. It's just kind of a reaction, so it's one of those things that's kind of funny now. All right. And I bring that up to show a contrast here, to illustrate a contrast here. I did enjoy Rio. I did enjoy the sights. I did enjoy walking along Copacabana. And it was just gorgeous. And seeing the city from the mountain up above, from Sugarloaf Mountain. It really is breathtaking in its beauty from up above. But in that beauty, there's a lot of pain, a lot of brokenness, a lot of orphans, a lot of pain, a lot of brokenness. So, I would like to contrast that to going back to the orphanage that I was there with my friend, and we were helping them and hanging out with them and helping them for about 3 weeks. One instance, after we had dinner, a lot of black beans, little pieces of chicken, and it's a little bit of salad, and like a sweetness, and it was just good, homey food, regular food for the orphans there, and just enjoyed it a lot, so much. They had me come in, and I walked in, and there was little couches, little chairs, kids were on the floor. There's about maybe 18 of them. And so they sat me in a chair, kind of like this, a little bit bigger than this, actually. Had a high top, kind of bigger, wider. They sat me down. And after they sat me down, we were watching some Brazilian TV show or movie, and they were laughing, kind of talking, and a little bit of English here, and I didn't speak Portuguese. I didn't speak Portuguese. And so, but I'm a good communicator with other languages even that I don't know, because being an ESL teacher and traveled so much, you just use your hands a lot and speak and understand things differently and just take your time in doing it. So, suddenly there was a younger boy sitting on my lap on this side. There was a little girl that got up here and sat on here. There was I can't remember, boy or girl that sat up in between, on the floor, right against the chair, my legs like this, kind of in between. And there was a little boy that crawled up on the back of the chair and so I kind of leaned forward, and he kind of was on the back ledge of the chair, and he was there, and he kind of had his arm around here, and there's a 1, 2, 3, 4, and there was a boy or girl that had a hold of my leg over there, kind of had her arm, I think, around my leg, kind of was against the side of the chair. So I was sitting there with all of this, and I was going, wow. And they were, I just felt them as they pat me, they'd love on me, they'd smile at me, and I was really pretty much overcome with this. I remember a very emotional moment that was felt by me, no one else, and I was just like, oh, Lord Jesus. And I went, oh, orphans. I asked for good life for them, a loving life for them. Orphans. Yeah. Okay, I'd like to say this. The soul treasure. This is called, this podcast is Soul Treasures from the Open Road, or from the road. Let's compare and contrast for a moment. The orphans from Mardin in Turkey, the orphans at the orphanage from Rio de Janeiro. These orphans were orphans without mother or father, but they were never abandoned. Well, you can contrast that to the street kids of Rio de Janeiro that I saw. Bangkok, Thailand that I saw. Phnom Penh that I saw. Up in Laos that I saw. A couple other places like Cairo. I just want to say that the street kids, without that grace around them, that love around them, without someone helping them and providing for them, turned differently. They turned to more of an opportunist, even at a very young age. Yeah. That's why it's said in a place in the New Testament, what is pure religion? The only time I think that it uses the word religion in the New Testament is one time. Is it twice? One time? Well, this is what I think of. The one time that it's used that I think of, the word religion, I think it's used in Acts too, but the one time that it's used, it is this. Quote, pure religion is this, to take care of the widows and the orphans, and to keep yourself from being corrupted by the world. But pure religion, which I understand that we're going to talk about religion later, and there's a real other side to religion that we're going to talk about. And we're going to talk about, well, I guess I am, religion as contrasted with relationship. So, but that's another time. Let me say this. In the United States of America, we live in a broken world. We live in the United States of America. Let's just take that. And with the brokenness of the world and the brokenness of families, and me being a school teacher for many years, there are kids that act just like street kids, that actually come from a home. A lot of times it's what we call a broken home, but very undisciplined and very non-taught, very go with the flow, not really understanding social behaviors and a lot of different things that we could talk about. So you don't have to be going to Rio to understand there's a problem with orphans still in our society that might have a mother or a father, but are raised in millions of situations where it's just like really no one's there. And it creates a world of opportunists and victimhood. So we're not free from that, even though you haven't been some of the places I have. It could be in your very backyard. Just something to think about. Would a father walk away from his children? In this world, yes. We've seen it all over the place. It's a broken world. Question for you to think about. These are questions for you to think about. In your experience, do you believe your Father, the Maker, has walked away from you at one time. Okay. Sometimes we feel abandoned. It's a natural human experience. So it's not that you should feel guilty if you feel abandoned. I have felt abandoned. I have felt that. Emphasis on feeling. Especially in my travels. Sometimes I would feel so close. And most, feel so close to friends and family, and especially to my Maker, to the one and only. My friend, I would say. There are times in my life, in the States and on the road, where I have felt truly alone. The human experience of being totally alone. Feeling like, my feelings coming out. Not necessarily the truth of the matter, but my feelings were, I'm abandoned. How do I know, and how do you know that you shouldn't feel guilty about being abandoned? So being abandoned is very normal, though so serious. Let me illustrate it. Let me illustrate it by something you should all know about. Even if you're secularly minded, okay. No judgment from me on that. It's not my business. Truly. We're all in this together, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, friends and neighbors. So when I express these things, and I'll bring up something of a spiritual nature, this is not to leave out anyone, especially if you come from a secular nature or a non-religious nature. That doesn't have to be so bad. Hopefully it gives you, as you want to be, the very essence of being objective. Although that's not necessarily what happens. So remember this. I'm going to talk about Jesus, the man God, fully divine, fully human. If you remember, at the lowest point of his life, as it was fixing to end, the lowest point of his life, he was raised up. And what were those words that you now thinking, what's he going to say? Some of you know. Jesus himself, the God-man, said, as he's dying, my God, why have you forsaken me? And he breathed out. Spoiler, 3 days later, there's a non-forsaking Jesus. He was never forsaken. He was actually quoting from the Psalms, I think Psalm 22. So he was very much feeling an abandonment, Jesus himself. So if you ever feel abandoned, don't feel guilty like, oh no, God's displeased with me for feeling abandoned. No ma'am, no sir. That's a normal human experience. It's what you do about it. The feeling is not the truth in this case. All right. I'm going to end this. I'm going to skip this part because I want to get to this part to conclude our thoughts on this, about orphans. That in a way that we're all orphans. The human experience is a connecting experience, but that comes down to you as a person, and me as a person, and she and he, and as people. But as an individual, and as you know, if you have any life experience, there is an aloneness that we all have, and we all participate in, and we all identify with, and we all either say, come here, you're mine, or we spend a lifetime going, oh no, and are desperate not to be alone. Causes problems, but we won't get into that. Here's the deal. That's didn't even say it that way. Here's something for your immediate consideration and future consideration. We are never, ever alone. Truly. Because we can't see something does not make it non-existent. In fact, just the opposite. There's so much things that we see now that we didn't see in the past, just because we see with different eyes. And that includes an orphan's father. And we're all orphans. And adoption is certainly a truth in this. For the Maker, the Father, has never walked away. Never, ever walked away. However you feel, please consider this while you're on the road to the store, to the bank, to visit your kids, to a funeral, to a wedding, to go to the park to get away for a while, take a walk, on vacation, or on the road. And there's a difference between being on vacation and being on the road. Remember this. I'm speaking to all my fellow orphans out there. And I was raised in a loving home. Still, I know what it is to feel like an orphan. But the feeling is not always the truth. I'm ending with this quote from the New Testament for you to think about. Quote, even if we are faithless, he remains faithful, for he cannot disown himself. So let's be orphans together, signing off, because the big family is coming. The big family is coming. Love y'all. Adios.